When I first started using Procreate, I felt completely overwhelmed by the choice of brushes. My first instinct was to try and recreate as closely as possible the pencils, the pens, the brushes I was already using. I even tried to recreate the texture of pencil on paper and find watercolor brushes that could make smooth washes, because that's what I knew, that's what I felt comfortable with, and that's what my clients expected. But in trying to imitate traditional media, I wasn't taking full advantage of the incredible digital tools Procreate had to offer. Now, 5 years later, in response to a lot of your requests, I put together a list of the brushes I use most often, and maybe they'll be right for you too. Those brushes fall into roughly 5 categories. At the top of my menu, and most often used, are the brushes for designing and drafting, including pencils, pens, shapes, and grids. Second, below that, what I call the marker-like brushes for applying quick tone to create contrast, depth, and shadow. Third, below that, brushes for applying man-made textures to suggest materials in rendered plans, elevations, and perspectives. Below that, number 4, brushes for applying natural textures to create trees and plants and skies and growies on the ground plane. And finally, brushes for creating the lighting effects you've seen in a lot of my videos. Now, that's a lot to cover in one video, so let's do the design and drafting brushes today, and then we'll cover the rest of the brushes in several more episodes after this one. First up are the technical pen, the Narinder pencil, and the 6B pencil. Now, these look pretty much the same from a distance, but when you zoom in, you can see that the technical pen line is solid black, and the Narinder has a little pencil-like texture, and the 6B pencil has a whole lot of texture. Now, this may seem like a minor difference, but if you draw a shape with this 6B pencil and you try to fill it with color, the color will leak through the porous texture and fill the entire page. By contrast, the technical pen makes a solid line when you draw a shape, and if you fill this kind of shape with color, the color stays inside. Here's a real-world example. To create a new base for this black stone fountain, first I drew the outline I wanted with a technical pen. Then I filled that in with a solid color, like we've been talking about. Then I turned both the outline and the fill on the same layer into one color using the brightness control. Then I selected it, added a new layer on top, then added the color and the texture of the stone using the soft airbrush and the artist crayon brush. So that's why you may want to consider using the technical pen before you use any of the pencil brushes. The last brush I want to discuss before we go on to the drawing guides is the flat brush. I include it here because I often begin designing with a flat brush, then add detail with a technical brush as I begin to see, air quotes, the design that I'm trying to represent. So the flat brush and the technical pen brush really go hand in hand for me. Now, I can't talk about the design and drafting brushes I use without also mentioning the drawing assist guides. The drawing assist guides are what make traditional straight edge drafting possible. As long as drawing assist is activated in the layers menu, these guides will snap your line work along ready-made grids, including a 2D orthogonal grid that can be adjusted to any size. That same 2D orthogonal grid that can also be shifted to any angle. An isometric grid that can also be changed in size and angle. And finally, a perspective grid with up to 3 vanishing points of your choosing. These drawing guides are in every way as much a part of the design and drafting tools as the brushes themselves. My list of design and drafting brushes also includes circles, squares, triangles, something called decimals, dots, grids, basically anything that might come in handy when laying out a design. All of these shapes can be adjusted with the transformation tools to create other shapes, whether you need to make ellipses of different sizes, or rectangles to help diagram and calculate square footage, as I'm doing here, or just dot fields and grids to create a trellised walkway in perspective, as I'm doing here. As you get familiar with all these, what I call design and drafting brushes, you'll discover other Procreate features that work with them and help you save time, like the way I'm using cut and paste here to expand one repeating section of this plan so I can study the size of the project relative to something the client already knows, namely Union Square in New York City. So that's it for part 1, design and drafting brushes. The next videos will be about the brushes I recommend for rendering. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.